Jane.
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 Jane. Jane.
Mom.
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 Grandma.
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 Great day!
She would sit in the two little chairs that were kind of stuck together by the fireplace and read a book when the TV was blaring, the stereo was on, 4 boys were making a lot of noise, and I'm sure I was adding to it myself. And you could call her and say, Mom, Mom, and she wouldn't even hear you because she'd learned how to turn it all off and get her solitude in the midst of chaos.
I'd go out and stretch on the bed, and she'd put her book down and she'd listen. And when I was leaving, she'd say, not very often, but she'd say, you know, I've read this same darn paragraph 9 times.
As I've talked to people over the last couple weeks, other people who are our age and who remember our house as kids, they remember it as pretty much a free-for-all zone where almost anything went.
We lived across the hall from each other in an apartment house. So I guess you'd say we spent time together.
Jane made stepping stones through the garden so that she could actually deliver pies and have a chat over the fence.
Yeah, I always thought that fences made good neighbors, but those people who think that didn't know Ken and Jane.
She would see me and she would just make a beeline for me, and we would embrace and have a kiss and a chat. So warm.
What I really liked about my mom was she never judged anybody until she made a decision about them on her own. She said very few bad things about anybody.
I bonded with her right away because she's such a nurturing kind of person, you know. She's the kind of person that you wanted to go and hug every time you saw her, so which I did all the time.
But she could also be firm, and she could say, that's enough, move on.
She was honest.
She was very honest.
If she had something to say, she would tell you.
Well, she doesn't hold back when she feels something about somebody.
She came across and knocked on the door, and she said, my kids tell me you're growing marijuana. Sal had asked me to cultivate this plant that was growing at the back of the house, and so that it covered the meter, with the hydrometer, which he thought was particularly ugly. So I cultivated this thing, grew tall, bushy, and covered the hydrometer, and of course it grew so tall that from the Wright's back porch you could see it. So I went down to the library, it's the academic approach, right? And to see what it looked like, and sure enough, I'd been cultivating marijuana.
Mom also had a sense of the macabre as well, too. She loved murder mystery kind of stuff.
English humor, you know, slightly darker.
She was an interesting person because she had a lot of different interests herself.
Painting and knitting.
She baked, and socks. There were lots of socks.
Terrific cook. Terrific. Experimental, too. Yeah, she was always trying something new.
Art, painting, knitting, anything related to do with the arts.
In her new house, she always had her easel set up right near the big open window, and she always looked really happy when she was doing that.
Painting was her most favorite thing, and I also love doing it.
I learned to quilt whether I wanted to or not, and of course I'm so happy I did because I'm very proud of what she insisted I do.
She liked to paint with us, to bake with us, so anything that she was with us and teaching us.
I just liked spending time with her. It didn't really matter what we were doing.
And she always bought me paints and paper and did work with her too.
She made us a lot of pairs of socks, and then we all got quilts.
Mine has girls all over it, and they all have different colored hair, and she made the hair out of yarn and thread and stuff. My favorite thing to do with Grandma was probably to talk to her.
I'd bake cookies with her, and she'd read me stories. And usually halfway through the story, she'd fall asleep, and I'd sit there waiting for her to read again.
If you tooted, she'd go, oh, it was your turn. She would.
Like a minute and a half, and Julie's into the fart jokes. She's truly a Wright.
Do you know, in 40 years, I never saw her pissed off, and I'm sure she must have been at times. 6 kids with guys like you.
Yeah. Most people know about the wooden spoon.
I remember the wooden spoon, but I never got it myself.
She got better and better at finding the correct apparatus to use on us over the years. So it started with just your basic wooden spoon, the kind you'd stir soup with, and then she got one with a hole in it.
I got that once in a while, the one with the slot in it. because it went faster and it hurt more.
Mom used the wooden spoon, Mrs. Harvey used a paint stirrer. You know, everybody had their thing.
I don't actually remember ever hitting me with it.
I don't think so.
I do remember her threatening it a lot. And apparently she had a shoe as well that John experienced.
I can't remember what Uncle John did, but she chased him with a shoe.
I was walking out the back door and Mom told me to take the garbage out, and I made some comment and she said, "Don't be so rude," and I told her to fuck off. She came running outside. It was summertime. She chased me across the backyard and tackled me in the backyard and beat me on both sides of my face with a rubber running shoe. And then she stood up and she looked at Gary Cole and she said, "You want some of this?"
She was really all mother.
I was never afraid to drive with her. Were you?
Oh, you're joking.
Your mother didn't have a sense of direction.
I mean, she'd get off the subway and head north when she was supposed to go south with full confidence she was going the right way.
She was driving us home, and the car just kept going to one side. And she said that the car had a tilt on it, but I don't know.
She knew northeast, south, and west.
No, she didn't. She didn't.
When we went to art, I was the driver. I took her, so we didn't get lost.
We left Peter's one time when Peter lived not where he is now, but in the first house. And she came out of the driveway and turned left. And I waited a while, and I finally had to say, "Jane, are we going to Paris or home?"
If you're driving from Galt to Toronto and you come to a booth and a man says, what's your purpose for your visit to the United States today? That's an issue.
I remember her music tastes changing over the years.
We always went over to their house and they would always have classical blasting really loud, like,
Elevator music?
yeah.
Not opera, I never remember any opera, but mostly just very mellow dinner music, you know? Something that you wouldn't bang your head to, but you know.
Harry Belafonte, she liked him very much.
The Mills Brothers.
I know she liked country music.
Tammy Wynette.
I didn't think she liked country.
I could tell he didn't like country, so maybe she didn't tell him.
I think she had pretty eclectic tastes.
I don't think she liked rock and roll, but she did like the Beatles.
Tom Jones.
Rod Stewart.
Rap.
Classical. I know she didn't like really heavy classical because she often fell asleep at the symphony.
I only ever hear jazz at their house, but I'm pretty sure that's Granddad's favorite.
Her tastes were quite universal.
Mom liked something called mother's music.
Oh.
Mother's music.
Mother's music.
Yeah, mom's music or something, yeah.
Silence.
Silence.
Who was your favorite child?
Who was her favorite child?
Well, I would say...
I don't think she had a favorite.
Well, that's a politically charged question.
Everybody knows it.
Her favorite child? Elizabeth, no question. 100%.
Elizabeth.
Aunt Liz.
She never made any real waves.
Aunt Liz, she seemed like she was pretty goody two-shoes. And the brothers were probably pretty wild.
I think it probably changed every day.
I think I was her favorite, don't you?
I don't know.
I think so.
I heard lots of stories about Mom's brothers.
Yeah.
Not all flattering.
I think she liked something about every child individually better than she liked it about the other one.
She treated us differently because we are different.
She was very good at giving everyone equal love.
I think Grandma's favorite was probably Aunt Chris, Aunt Liz, Uncle John, Uncle Peter, Uncle Tony, maybe Mark.
It's a tie, 6-way tie.
Or we're all missing the point and she liked Patrick the dog best.
What's his name?
Patrick?
Yeah, Patrick.
I think Patrick the dog was her favorite because half the time she called her kids Patrick.
Maybe Dandy Boy, but Patrick, I think, was her favorite.
She got Patrick when Dad was on a business trip in Japan. She must have been lonely with just her and the 6 of us.
I would say Patrick. I know she loved Dandy Boy. She loved having the dogs, but I think she really loved Patrick.
That's why she gave me that advice. If everybody wants a dog and Mark doesn't want a dog, just go get a dog when he's away.
Thanks, Mom. Really appreciate that.
The day that we were moving them, helping them move into their new apartment,
I remember Granddad kept screaming her name from the other room, and she said to Tessa and I, "Excuse me, dears, God is calling."
What I think Dad likes most about Mom is the fact that she put up with him for 57 years.
They seem to really like each other, and I've never seen them fight.
Definitely different, but they complemented each other really well.
But they kind of seem like opposites to me. Like Grandpa would seem more strict and stuff, and Grandma was more easygoing.
I can remember being there for dinner one night, and Ken said, what was it? Something about putting the cake had to be sitting straight up on the plate or something.
yeah.
And of course Jane would just sort of roll her eyes and get that little, that little shrug that she had.
Her husband was important to her. Even though he annoyed her, as all husbands do, she really loved Ken.
If they had a problem, it was discussed and dissected and finished with, usually the same day.
Even though I guess marriages are work, theirs didn't seem like it was.
Ken adored her. That's how I felt about it.
Yeah, very much so.
And that she was his rock.
I think he basked in Jane's light from the first moment I saw him. They were just as one and very considerate of each other.
I think they were friends just as much as they were husband and wife.
I think they were a perfect balance. He's kind of type A, pretty intense, and she doesn't let almost anything bother her. When she does, she's open and honest and tells it like it is. So
I'm sure it was hard for her the last 2 years where Ken, stepped up and did all the things that she used to do. But I can't say I ever heard her complain about it.
no,
Never.
I can't either.
That, I feel really bad, Ken's doing it. I don't think so. I think she was happy to let him
Yeah.
step up and do all that the last 2 years.
I can't imagine a couple better suited to one another.
I met John in the parking lot, and he mentioned that his mom was in the hospital in intensive care. And I went in, and it was a very bad time. This was a couple of years ago. And Ken was heartbroken, but he was more heartbroken than anybody I've ever seen. And it really struck me at the time. And what really made me feel good about things is that, that things got better, and they had this extra time together that, he didn't think they were going to ever have again.
They raised their family, they entertained, they traveled, but the last 2 years were remarkable.
It's such a cliche, but I think she did complete him.
The great love of her life, really. She loved her children, but I think your father was on a special plane.
60 years from now, when I'm old and married to someone, I always wanted to be like them.
Everything, his whole world. She was his whole world.
Just one word.
Wise.
Friend.
Classy.
Genuine.
Strong.
Talented.
Warm.
Accepting.
Grace.
Calm.
Great.
Wonderful.
Loving.
Remarkable. Everything.
Fun. Kind-hearted.
Joyful.
Wow.
Pragmatic.
Joie de vivre.
Nice.
Determined.
Solid.
I don't think it's possible to describe her in one word.
She was a woman who was extremely happy inside her own skin.
She was there. She was always there.
I guess I would sum it up by saying that if you picked out all the things you'd like in a really, really good friend and neighbor, that would be Jane.
She is a person that I aspire to grow up to be like.
For me, she just exudes goodness.
She was kind and she was loving, that her heart was open to anyone.
I never knew someone that didn't like Grandma or Grandma didn't like.
She's just always there for you.
She was always a very good friend. A very good friend.
Jane felt more to me like a friend, even though she was closer to my mother's age. She was my friend.
I thought of her as one of my best friends, even despite the fact that she was 60 years older than me. She seemed to get it.
Always had something positive to say about people.
She knew people for who they really were and completely accepted that.
She was unbelievably forgiving. Her and Dad.
She phoned me on the Saturday before she died, and we were planning next summer. A picnic on Sheila O'Donovan's lawn, and in a little voice she said, "Do you think we could go back to Paris?"
She looked at us with complete love and pride.
We are her legacy.
I love you.
She asked me in a very serious way in the end to keep a promise that I haven't been able to keep. And I guess I would owe her an apology. Probably the Sunday night just before she died. she had had a bad day, and she just kind of turned around at the end of the day, and everybody else was gone. Dad left, and I stayed for a few extra minutes. And she said she wanted to just speak seriously for a minute, which she didn't do very often. And she said to me, you know, if I do die, when I die, I need you to promise me something. And I said, I don't even need to hear what it is, of course, I'll promise. And she kind of lost her composure for a few minutes, and we both waited, and I knew it was something pretty serious. And she looked me right in the eye and she said, you have to promise me that if I do die, when I die, you won't let your brother Mark make a video about me.